There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind.
It was basically a cube with inside of a sphere where the points of the cube were touching the outside of the sphere.
Roger. There's troubleshooting machines out here.
So this isn't anything that just is limited to the United States. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
This is Michael Mazzola, and you are listening to That UFO Podcast.
Have you ever looked up to the skies and seen something you can't explain? Or walked deep in the forest and sensed something watching you? Do you believe in an afterlife or a hidden veil that can communicate with the living? Then you need Shadows of Your Mind magazine. Download all issues completely free at shadowsmagazine.co.uk. Shadows of Your Mind, where your search for the answers begins.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast. Very excited to have a very special guest with me, host of a very popular YouTube channel on this episode. I'm going to get straight into the interview this week. So on this episode, I have a photographer, filmmaker, paranormal researcher, someone who believes that the paranormal is very much normal. I have, you'll know him very well as the Undead Gaucho. Undead Gaucho, how are we doing this evening?
I'm doing great. And first off, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me on this podcast. I've always wanted to be on a podcast. I listen to your podcast. I listen to Somewhere in the Skies, and it's been a dream of mine. So I'm super happy to be here.
No, that's awesome. We could do that thing where we go back and forward and I say, oh, I love your YouTube channel as well. It's so good. And I'm going to do that anyway within the questions, so we won't bore the listeners with that. But thank you very much. And obviously you've mentioned Somewhere in the Skies, which is Ryan Sprague, who is actually one of the listener questions is from Ryan as well, of Somewhere in the Skies. So we'll get to that a little bit later on. But got a ton of interest when I announced you were coming on, and I didn't give the listeners, as usual, too much notice of it either. Got some really good questions to get to, but people are really interested in a lot of your views. Now, obviously, you'll be best known from anyone listening to this podcast or who hasn't heard you, that you've got an awesome YouTube channel. A lot of the listeners I know watch that YouTube channel as well as listen to myself. Your accent definitely comes out in a poll top of the accents, as we were joking about before we hit record. Your videos are my favourite ones, obviously, are the UFO and UAP ones, and you've got a lot of stuff on there. What are some of the origins then of your YouTube channel?
Well, originally it started because I just wanted to film, and I've always enjoyed using my cameras, even since I was a little kid. So after a long time of not having a channel and seeing, how the world was changing and media was changing, and seeing that there was this, the platform's been there for so long, I thought, I got to do this. And I just started using whatever I had. Originally, it was just like my phone. And from there, I finally picked up another camera. It had been a while since I had a camera, so I started getting back into my camera, taking photos and filming, and it spawned all from that,
The channel itself's got really popular, hitting close to 2,000 subscribers now as well. I was looking back in some of your older travel sort of videos and whatnot, as people may or may not know, you're out in Buenos Aires, Argentina, home of Lionel Messi and other things Argentinian, obviously, for those that weren't too familiar. So there's a lot of really cool stuff to kind of check out on there as well. What was your interest though in the paranormal growing up that obviously has eventually led you to having a popular YouTube channel on it?
Well, I've always been into the paranormal. I try to think of situations or moments when I was younger that really sparked me to look into this stuff. And it just seems like there's so many strange things that happened to me growing up that probably happened to a lot of people that led me in this direction. It sort of started with my mom. She's really into high strangeness and UFOs. She's just open to it. She's not a researcher or anything, but she's open to it, and she's always kind of left that there for me and like showed me that there's nothing wrong thinking outside the box or looking at the world and questioning reality. So it's been a long journey to basically get to creating videos about this subject and talking about the subject openly, but it's always been there. It's always been in the foreground. And if I started listing out stories, I'd probably be talking for a long time. But when I was a kid, I remember my first kind of strange story was with shadow beings or shadow people. A lot of people see shadow beings and shadow people, right? Especially kids, and they blame it on imagination and things like that. And I really don't go around telling these stories that often, because I feel like something that's very important that we need, especially in this community, is credibility. And I was a kid, right? So, but the interesting thing is that I actually didn't start thinking it was shadow beings or shadow people that I was interacting with when I was a kid until I got older and I started doing research. And the cases and stuff that I was looking into matched perfectly with what was happening to me as a kid in this certain apartment. Once we left that apartment, it never happened again, which I found strange. So that situation, that experience, which kind of, in a way, kind of traumatized me because it was pretty scary, that sparked me to look more into it. And then I started asking myself, is it possible that what you were seeing was this? Because it matches perfectly. So yes, that's one thing, but I could probably list 10 different stories like that growing up that happened to me.
I'll say, like, I never saw anything per se like that when I was younger. I don't have any ghost tales, and I've got a few podcast friends who recently asked me to do some stories and stuff, but I don't really have many. I've got a couple of UFO sightings that I've talked about enough times on the podcast, but for all I love UFOs, UAP, aliens, I would love to see something far, far closer than I ever have. I'd love to see a being at a distance, not too close, but, sort of close enough that I could run away safely. But I would be terrified to see any sort of spirit or ghost. And so how young were you? Were you not really scared when you have these kind of entities kind of around?
Oh, no, I was super scared. But the thing is, when you're young, you really don't understand what's happening, right? And then the adults around you are just telling you, like, it's your imagination. So I remember what would happen is I would obviously, it'd be in my room alone, it'd be dark, and I'd see, like, the outline of a person walking around the room. And for so many nights, I thought it was just, my imagination. I was seeing things because there was this window in the bedroom that went out to a street. And it was like a busy street, so trucks and stuff would drive by, and sometimes lights would shine through the window and reflect. And I was trying to figure it out, I was trying to tell myself, like, no, it's just the lights and stuff. And then one night, I actually made a video about this, so I'm not afraid to tell the story. But one night, I was in the room, and I decided to confront this figure that I kept seeing. And the weird thing was, it was kind of like, it looked kind of like it was, I don't know how to say this, like moving in and out, like tribal dancing kind of a thing, like shaking. And I just kept telling myself, this has got to be in your head. I'm a little kid. I'm not going to be afraid. My dad kept telling me, you got to face your fears and stuff. So I got up and I went up to it thinking it's going to disappear. As soon as I walk up to it, it's going to be a coat rack or it's going to be a shadow or something. And I walked up to it. It was taller than me. And I remember it looked down at me, but I couldn't make out a face or anything. And I got so scared. I felt just fear, panic. And my parents were like across the hall. So obviously the first thing I did was try to run to my parents' room. I don't remember how small I was, but probably like 6 or 7. I try to run across the hall, and when I run across the hall, I can see the living room, right? From the hall, you can look to your left and you see the living room. When I get into the middle of the hall, I look out into the living room, and I swear I saw just a whole group of these same figures all standing in the room doing that same movement that the one was doing in the bedroom. And I was, at that point, my mind is trying to comprehend what I'm seeing. And I just remember it was like they didn't have faces or any sort of distinctive features. They were like figures, and they all just turned around. I don't know how I could tell they turned around, but they all turned around at the same time, and it was just like a room full of them. And I ran to my parents' room, and I obviously like screamed or something. They woke up, and my mom got so scared she started telling my dad to close the door, like shut the door. And then my dad kind of got scared too, which kind of made me think when I got older, because he kind of acted like he thought maybe there was somebody in the house, and that always stuck with me. It was like we all got scared together. But once I left that house, those kinds of things didn't happen anymore. And I would actually, like, anytime I would be in the dark somewhere for years, I'd be like just looking, trying to see if I could see that again, and I would check things, like, is this the same thing? And I'd grab something and it'd be like a coat rack or a shadow, and I'd be like, okay, it's nothing. But I just clearly remember those situations. And when I read cases of shadow beings and shadow people and stuff like that, I automatically made the connection. But again, I was young, I was just a kid, and kids see things in the dark. So I can tell you the story as descriptive as I just did. I could probably get more descriptive because it wasn't, one night, but I still try to hold on to my credibility and not put all my chips in one corner. Who knows what could have been happening. I do think it's strange that once I left that location, I didn't have that experience ever again. So that was that.
Thanks for sharing, because that was pretty freaky. And like I say, I'm a fan of all things paranormal, but there's a lot of stuff I don't like. I don't want to see shadow people, ghosts, anything like that would be something I'd be saying no thank you to. I was scared of the dark pretty much my whole life. Still have a little bit of a thing in the dark. I'd rather hit a light on whatever I'm going about. Because I don't know if Thomas the Tank Engine is a famous UK cartoon. You probably get it in the US and stuff. I know you were saying that's where you grew up to. And I had wallpaper, like you say, as the light came through the window during the night, it would hit these trains, and it sort of looked like they were coming out the wall. And that's why I'm scared of the dark. So not necessarily shadow people on the same scale, but I had cartoon trains coming out the wall at me. So but and that was enough. So that's levels above what you're talking about.
Yeah, but I feel like everybody has their own experience and their own journey that sort of pushes them to look into the paranormal and to question these kinds of things. So even using the train and the lights flashing on there, something was causing that fear in you, and something you remember it till this day. I'm saying, but of course it's great that you're like, exactly what you were seeing and what was going on. I actually never told those stories to people because I was just like, I don't even know what happened.
And do you know what it is? I'm more than happy. I believe those stories when people tell them. And like you've kind of said anyway, some people may tell these stories and maybe that's not what's happening, and it's the way it's being interpreted by them. But then obviously what you saw, and that's fine. Everyone's got those sorts of stories. I'm happy to believe and not witness or see that myself. And again, but I see the opposite. And a lot of people, when I talk about the kind of UFOs I've seen, of which 3 or 4 different sightings, a couple of particularly good ones, and people just don't want to hear about it. They don't want to, if they're not interested in that at all. And for me, more recently, especially the last couple of years, people talk about the phenomenon in general, and ghosts, shadow people, giants, all these different, Bigfoot, they're all starting to come into one again, as people like Lou Elizondo is now championing that the world in reality is far stranger than we could ever imagine. And it seems more and more that all this stuff's connected, and it's something we'll talk a little bit later on about, like multidimensionals and interdimensionals. Like, if you see shadow people, are you seeing something that in its existence is seeing you like a shadow person? Like you say, these things could literally be almost witnessing you. And you're acting scared, and they run away, and that something follows you, and you never know they're looking in that room and they see 3 beings, but it's you with your mum and your dad, and you don't know what's going on in different realities, or it's really interesting to think about. And like you say, credibility is huge, and that's something I talk about a lot on this show as well. I think it's how you talk about it, and that's why your channel's getting so popular as well. It's the way you present yourself and the way you present the stories, your arguments, your opinions. And at the end of the day, this is all opinion. I remember I said back in one of my really early interviews that in all of these subjects, no matter what it is, aliens, UFOs, ghosts, paranormal, everyone could be wrong. We don't 100% yet know who is right. Not everyone's going to be right, though. Most people are going to be wrong, in fact. But we don't know who that person is yet that's going to be right. So it's hard to kind of blow people off yet. That you don't know who's race to kind of join in at the moment, which is a big part of it. I want you to just touch on though your YouTube channel itself. You talked about your background in filmmaking. I mentioned right at the start, the quality of your videos are extremely high, and we were joking again before we started recording about I've got a coffee based on your mood lighting and coffee you drank in your UFO hotspots video, which is very much obviously worth checking out, people, over at Undead Gaucho's YouTube channel. What's the background that you put so much effort into the channel?
Well, like I said, I've always been into cameras, and I'm really into cinema and films ever since I was a kid. You know, back when Blockbuster existed, I used to love to go rent, VHS videos, and every weekend try to rent
I worked in Blockbuster when I was growing up in the UK.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I actually worked in a video store too. It's a weird place, right, to work in a video store. Sometimes you start to learn like what people really like, or what they think, by what they rent.
Especially when you can see their video history and what they rent.
Yeah. I worked in this, it was like a 2020 video or something, and it was in Los Angeles, like kind of like near Hollywood. And it was kind of a shady spot. It was when DVDs were already out and they were just renting VHSs still. And we had some unexplained customers, unidentified customers, that would come in there and rent crazy movies. But like I said, I've always been into it. And growing up in Los Angeles, you're like surrounded by the movie industry. I actually worked as an extra for some time. I did I don't really remember anymore what I did because it was when I was young, but I did extra work. My mom did extra work. My dad did extra work. So I've always kind of been into it. And as I grew older, I started thinking dude, you need to start taking your passions more seriously. Get another camera, start trying to really get into this. And if you're going to make content, and especially if I'm going to make content about high strangeness and the UFO phenomenon, I believe that I need to give you guys or everyone that watches it the best quality that I can, because I feel like good quality is going to make somebody that clicks on it that maybe isn't into the subject stay just a little bit longer, maybe to get into the subject. And that's really what I'm trying to do, is take my quality high enough to where if a kid watches it for the first time and he doesn't even know it just came on because YouTube just suggested it, he's just going to stay watching it because he's like, wow, look how good the quality is. I wonder who this guy is or what this is. And they might get inspired and become UFO researchers.
I love that. And it's got a lot of hallmarks. And if you talk about Lou Elizondo's 5 observables for unidentified objects, you've got a couple of the hallmarks of a good quality channel or podcast or video podcast or blog, whatever you want to call it, because you've got the quality of the production there. That stands out like a sore thumb. You've got a little bit of humour in it as well, which is something I think is really important. I've got more comfortable putting my personality across as the show's going on and further, and I hope people enjoy listening to that, because it's just me being a bit more myself. But even like I say, I joked about you drinking the coffee, but the whole mood thing and your hand up, and don't you hate it when YouTubers drink coffee? But yeah, and it's just it just brings a little bit of it's natural. That's the way people are. But then the content itself is really high quality, but the videos are really digestible as well. Like your videos are normally 6 minutes long. And it is that, maybe it's that Twitter generation where people want bite-sized content and fast bang, 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 bang. But it's really high quality stuff. And like you say, I think anyone can watch it and get something from it.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I totally agree. Basically, that's like my whole idea for making the videos short is also to make them easily digestible, right? Because like I said, I really want people that aren't into this phenomenon to look into it and start questioning it. Sometimes I think we in the community, or just anyone, when talking about this, we can like overload people that don't know anything about it, because we spend days and hours looking into it and researching it, and we just want to talk to somebody about it. We want somebody to hear us. We want to have the conversation. So finding an easy way to present it to people and not leave them like, you know, not have them want to click away or leave the video quick enough. I just want to catch them for that moment and maybe inspire them, you know. That's my whole goal with it. I could make longer videos, and it may be possible, you know, that in the future I make longer videos, because I really would love to. Talking about the quality and stuff as well. Like I said, I'm into cinema and filmmaking and photography, and right now what I'm using is the best quality I can get. I think I could go way higher with quality over time, because there are some expensive rigs out there and expensive, you know, cameras and all this kind of stuff. And that's honestly, I feel like that would be amazing for the community to have just have videos and just content out there that is high enough, like at the level of any other creative person or any other filmmaker, so people just enjoy it, you know.
And that's it. And there's definitely a place for it. And we talked about this before we came on, that we don't have studios. You're not sitting with two producers just now like Joe Rogan is in a very classy room, and we joked about the Spotify contract, and I'm clearly, from the video that no one is ever going to see, not sitting in a fancy studio. Gaucho can absolutely see where I'm sitting just now. But this is something you put together at your own cost, something I've put together at my own cost. With people have got Patreons, GoFundMe's, Kickstarters, all those sorts of things. And it's really tough times for everyone just now. So if you can get anyone contributing to help, it's amazing. But like you say, to keep putting out the content, it takes you time. If you've got a family, you know, I've got a family I've talked about before. I've got a job, you've got a job. It's not something I would love to do this 24/7, you know, and 8 hours of my day could literally be spent in a studio recording different shows, formats, different guests, hosts, all that kind of stuff. But reality kind of kicks in at the moment for everyone. Yeah. But again, I'll say people like myself as well, because people listen to this podcast, people like you, Ryan Sprague, Jay from Project Unity, Dave, Shadows Your Mind magazine, and sorry I've missed off loads of other people, are all putting this stuff out there, a lot of it at their own cost, but people appreciate it, and it's getting a really important message out at a very important time as well. Wanting to ask you then, you mentioned you grew up, you've said there in LA, you've mentioned where you've done a lot of extra work in the past, and you now live in Argentina. What currently is the South American attitude to unidentified aerial phenomenon?
You know, I feel like in Argentina and in South America, it's kind of like most people that I talk to believe in UFOs. My wife is a perfect example. Like, she's not into the subject like I am, but there's been cases or situations where I'm explaining something to her and she's like, yeah, well, they're real. What do you think? Of course they saw a UFO, they're real. And I've had that situation happen with a lot of people here, where it's just kind of accepted, but obviously there is a stigma. There is still the X-Files music that plays when they put it on the news. There's still, I think it's more that people are just around the world afraid to accept this subject and to let people know that they're into this subject. So I would think that if you come to South America, you're going to notice that, one, there's a lot of UFO hotspots in South America, and two, people are open to talk about it. And in general, people are more open in Argentina. We are like very friendly people. Most people think we're friendly. Some people don't, but you come here, you know, there's something called an asado. It's like a barbecue that everyone does on the weekends. Everyone gets together, everyone talks. It's really common to go out at night, so it's very social. So these kinds of subjects and stuff come up. People talk about it. and it is still a bit taboo, but there are groups here dedicated to researching the phenomenon, and they do good work. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a global phenomenon. We're all kind of stuck in this same story, this same paradigm where we're trying to get this conversation going in the right direction, and we're fighting for that. And wherever you go, you're going to come up with the same obstacles, the same barriers to jump.
I always get the impression whenever I see reports coming out from South America, normally with subtitles from local news, things like that, that the people, for whatever reason, seem more open to talking about it. That might just be the narrative or the way it's kind of spun. But like you say, people seem happier to do it. Like, I've talked a lot recently about how, particularly here in the UK, the conversation's almost non-existent. We've got the X-Files music and the logo, and it's still little green aliens, and the only person of any sort of authority, controversial or not, that talks about it in the UK is Nick Pope. But again, it's always the weird fonts in the articles and spooky, and it's not taken seriously, and that's something that some of us are looking to rectify soon. In the US, it seems to be the sort of the country that's really driving the conversation at the moment.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things the US is driving, rightly or wrongly, at the moment. Let's not go into that a few days before election night. But one thing that seems to, especially if you're involved in this topic, that the US seems to be right at the forefront of is the disclosure movement, obviously led by TTSA, Lou Elizondo, and other people. We've got the Senate bill that we're looking is obviously getting passed. UAP task force classified briefings going to come out, but there's going to be declassified briefings, hopefully, apparently, that will give us some information. In South America, though, do you think enough is enough? I'll say that again without, lisping. Enough is being done to push that movement forward. Are you happy with what you see from your end?
I mean, in general, I think I'm happy where we are as a whole when it comes to this. I do see your standpoint, or I see what you're saying about the UK, and I feel like we're still going to always have that issue. We're still going to have the X-Files music. We're still going to have scoffs and people thinking it's ridiculous. There's real topics and real things that aren't unidentified that people scoff and laugh at and don't take serious. I feel like TTSA really pushed the envelope and helped take this conversation to a new level. So a lot more people are taking it seriously in the States. And here in Argentina, like I said, I feel like it's being taken seriously, but not at the level that we're seeing in the States with TTSA and just that whole movement that they've started. I wish there was a branch of TTSA in Argentina. That would be cool, and one in the UK as well, and anywhere they were needed. Yeah. But I think it could be better, right? Always, I think it could be better. But I also keep coming back to this idea, like, we're always going to have this problem. We're always going to have this issue, and I feel like even the day the so-called UFO lands on the White House lawn, right? There's still going to be people that don't believe that the UFO landed, that it's CGI, that it's just, a government craft, that it's all a trick, that this isn't real, that the more I've looked into this, I've been looking into this actually probably since I was 10 years old, I go to the library and grab a book on aliens and UFOs. And I've been waiting for something like TTSA to appear on my radar, at least, right? Now I'm old enough to understand what's going on, and I can see how they're working and the positive things they're doing. But I also keep noticing that just as a species as a whole, the human species, for some reason, has difficulty accepting things that are new or different, right? We've seen it all throughout history. And this subject is going to be very new and very different for many people. Not for me and you, but for most people, it's going to be very new and very different. And haven't you ever met people that don't like to think further than they should? Don't like to think about certain things? Like, I've had people tell me, "Oh, don't even talk about UFOs. I don't even want to talk about that." Like, no.
Yeah, particularly, and do you know what? I used to think a lot of it was to do with religion, but some of the people that I've had the best conversations with, that have been most open to, okay, what about UFOs? Tell me about it, tend to be some of the most religious people, who they've got their very deep-seated, rooted faith in whatever God or whatever prophet they believe in. But they're the most likely to have a conversation with you about something else being out there. And actually, when you break away from the conversation, and how I like to start it is, okay, forget aliens coming from Mars just for a minute. What if it was something different? And you get their attention with that, and it's like, well, what do you mean? I'm not talking flying saucers coming from another planet. What if they were here? What if they were in a different reality? It's crazy, and the conversation tends to not go on too long, but it just gets them thinking a little bit differently. And yet can make you sound like you know what you're talking about, but it can make you sound crazy as well. And like you say, credibility with people like that doesn't really matter, because you're going to hit them with something really strange really quickly. But if you plant the seed in their head that, as you say, down the line, a documentary like The Phenomenon comes out, or they see a UFO report on the news or read it in the paper, maybe they just go back to that very short conversation with you, or they go back to that guy's YouTube channel they found with the really high production value, where they watched a 5-minute video, and they think, wait, actually, maybe I should pay a little bit more attention to this. So you're planting the seeds for stuff down the line. Which I think, again, and you mentioned, it'd be great to have a branch of TTSA in Argentina, but maybe the closest thing we've got to that at the minute is your YouTube channel, and that's no bad thing. I mean that because when you look at what some of the most prominent people at the front of the field, people will be sick of me saying Elizondo and co, but those people, Jacques Vallée and the like, they want other people to get involved. They want people doing the research. They want other people speaking out. You don't have to be a celebrity to have a really good conversation, an in-depth conversation. I would never claim, and never will probably be, famous, but if we've got enough people listening to this and enough people listen to your program or watch your show, there's quite a lot of an audience there who are hearing two different sides of a conversation now, and that gets out there, and that's happening across a lot of different platforms, whether it's vlogs, blogs, podcasts, magazines, TV shows, documentaries just now. So it's a really good time for it as well. Just touching on the last series of Unidentified, Lou Elizondo spent a lot of time in South America himself. I've spoke to a few people. Buddy from Alien Protocols mentioned he feels there's a bit of a superhighway, a UFO superhighway over South America as well. Is that something you've looked into much, thought much about, or why there's such a connection with South America and UFOs?
Well, the other day when I made that UFO hotspot video, the problem there was, as soon as I started I've been researching that for, everyone knows about UFO hotspots, but I was like, okay, I'm going to try to generalize this and see what I can get, where we can go with this. And I started realizing there is so much information from so many locations around the world. South America is one of those locations, like Chile, Peru, Argentina. I talked about it in the past, but I went to Cordoba. Cordoba, Argentina is known as a UFO hotspot. There's different locations there that are considered, hotspots. And I actually had I had a sighting right there. I went to this mountain called the Uritorco, and the Uritorco has a legend that inside of the mountain there's a race of alien beings that live in the mountain. The town, Capilla del Monte, is located at the bottom of this mountain, and it's all alien themed. All the shops have like aliens in the windows, and there's t-shirts and stuff you can buy. It's very touristy thing. When you drive in, the sign has a big alien on it. When you're driving in, there's a UFO in the park, a metal statue. So I love to go there whenever I visit Cordoba. I have family there. I went with my wife and we went camping at the base of this mountain. We actually climbed the mountain. I wouldn't suggest climbing the mountain unless you're in amazing shape. We made it to the top of the mountain. We were both like, oh my God, I don't know if I'll do that again. Or at least do it at night, maybe. See if you can find a tour guide that'll take you up at night so you're not like sitting in the sun, because there's not like high trees and stuff, so you're going to get sunburned. I was red like a lobster by the time I came down that mountain. And I didn't see any UFOs when I went up the mountain. But it was a beautiful, location. So we're camping there. We decided to go down to the town to grab some food, have some drinks. And the only way to get down to the town is to wait for a bus that comes to the base of the mountain. It's nighttime. I'm looking up the mountain and I'm thinking in my head, how amazing would it be if I could see something? This spot is known for UFO sightings, right? It's known for close encounters. I believe in this. I'm searching and researching and looking for this all the time. This would be perfect. And as I stare up at the sky over the mountain, I see this blue sort of flash appear on one, above the mountain, high enough to where it wouldn't be a drone, just because it wasn't the movement. It was just a flash, right? It was a blue flash. And I said, well, that's weird. My first thought was, wow, that's strange. Wow, look at that. I was just thinking I wanted to see something and I just saw a blue flash in the sky. That's strange. But it's just a light, right? You got to try to think logically. Who knows what that was? The next thing I see is that blue light appears in a separate part of the sky, like far enough to where if it was a craft, it just shot across the sky super fast. At that point, I'm like telling my wife, like, hey, look, of course, her husband loves UFOs. It's like, hey, look at the sky. Look at the UFO. I'm like, there's something in the sky. And she's like looking and we see the third flash and then it just kind of disappears. But again, the third flash was in a different location. So this thing was like zigzagging across the sky. And I thought it was super strange. But of course, like always, I try to stay logical and I think, well, it was just a flash. I didn't see a physical craft. Who knows what that was? But Argentina is definitely considered a UFO hotspot, and South America is considered a UFO hotspot. But I also found that if you speak to certain people from different locations, a lot of them will claim where they are as a UFO hotspot. That was also another issue I had when I was researching. I was like, wait a minute, there's so many UFO hotspots. How am I going to figure this out? Like, I have to look at all the cases and see how many cases happen in certain locations and add them up and see which one has more. And I don't know. I ended up thinking, what if this is just a sign that, this is a global phenomenon. This is happening to everyone everywhere. And there are a lot of sightings. Maybe there's certain locations where people just pay more attention to the sky, where the sky is clearer. Like, I think it's much more difficult to see a UFO in Buenos Aires with the fog and the clouds and stuff than it would be in the middle of Cordoba, which is like all mountains and kind of has that Roswell kind of vibe to it, So yeah, I think it's something that we should all think about, if, UFO hotspots and what that means, like what is attracting the phenomenon there, or is it that the phenomenon has always been there and we're just noticing it?
And it's really relevant when you're saying about, like, obviously light pollution in areas. I've said before, I live in the northeast of England and it's relatively clear skies. I'm far enough away from a city that there's a lot of fields and stuff near where I stay that it's quite, nice skies. That if the clouds aren't here in the UK, which they regularly are, you see a lot of stars. But someone like myself and someone like yourself, when we're out, you're probably walking with your head looking at the sky constantly, trying to see something or hoping you see something. Most people are no doubt walking about with their head kind of pointed down or on their phone, or, and that's just normal. The worst people to have a UFO sighting are people like us, because when you go to tell someone, it's like, oh yeah, of course the UFO guy saw a UFO, of course you did. And it's like, no, but I know what I was looking for. I know what a plane looks like at altitude. I'm pretty good at spotting the satellites, because even if it was a UFO, it could be an alien spacecraft, but if it moves like a satellite, like you say, it's probably a satellite. So yeah, it could be alien spacecraft tagging me, and if they move slow and in a straight line, I just put it down to being a satellite. So yeah, but I'm definitely one who's out kind of looking for them more, so maybe that's why I've had a couple of sightings.
No, that saying, keep your eyes to the skies, is very real. I feel like not enough people look up into the sky. In the past, 100 years ago, people were probably looking at the sky all the time. There was no cell phones, there was no distractions, and the stars were probably the most beautiful thing you could look at, because there was, no television. You were outside working the fields or doing whatever. And I also think that if you notice, I looked a lot into the ancient alien hypothesis, right? The ancient astronaut hypothesis, and the ancient aliens, the ancient astronaut hypothesis. That wasn't a plug for the History Channel, but what happened was like after looking into this for so long, somehow I always end up back there. at the ancient astronaut hypothesis. And I'm like, okay, so is it possible that in the past, these beings were interacting with us more often and more openly? One, because we had no way of spreading the stories that quick, right? Spreading their interactions with us that quick. Two, because consciously we were more open to it. You know, like when people would meditate 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago or whatever, they would actually, I feel like they would actually believe what they were meditating about or what they were praying about, right? They actually believed it. Nowadays, we've been taught that meditation is a form of relaxation, or, you know, a lot of people believe like doing yoga and prayer too is just like, you can pray, but you got to know, like, it's good for you. Some people believe it's just good for you. You know, they don't believe that it's actually going to do anything. They feel like it's a good way to clear their conscience or to feel better or to think about their life and stuff. But I feel like a long time ago, they actually believed it. So imagine, you know how some people do CE5 and they, like Stephen Greer promotes that whole thing. Imagine a bunch of people just having that level of determination to contact something, right? All sitting in a group with no distractions, with no internet, nothing clogging up their mind, just freely connecting their consciousness to whatever, right? Whatever there is in the universe, whatever energy, whatever there is. I started thinking, well, that's probably why there's all these stories of angels coming down and teaching us, and different gods coming down and interacting with us. Maybe it was that their level of consciousness was much higher because over the years we've kind of become distracted, right?
Absolutely. And one, you're talking about thousands or even hundreds of years ago, but still now, like indigenous tribes in America still have that connection to the stars, and they talk really openly. And Tom DeLonge tweeted quite a while ago, but one of the documentaries still to come is a 6-part series on indigenous tribes in America, and it's going to focus on that connection, I'm guessing, with UAPs and, you know, as you say, meditation, CE5, it's got all these different names, but whatever it is they do to kind of be at one with stars and, you know, call it a force, call it an energy, whatever you want to call it, they have not lost that because they can still distance themselves from modern distractions, and they may have a cell phone, but they can also put that away and spend a bit of time being at one with nature, I suppose, is the classic phrase, but it still works for a lot of people.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking too is, you know, that, have you seen that clip of Robert Bigelow on 2020 or 60 Minutes?
60 Minutes,
60 Minutes. And he, I used it a few times in some of my videos because I love the clip so much. And he says that we don't have to look into space for answers to this. It's here, right in front of us, like right under our noses. And something that inspired me to like try to think what he's talking about, right? What could he mean? And really, if you look at religion as just a starting point, right? You look at religion and just the different religions from around the world. Like you were saying earlier, sometimes it's easier to talk to religious people because, in my opinion, they're already kind of open to the idea of multi-dimensional beings and other realities. Because if you believe, something else,
higher power.
Exactly. Yeah. If you believe you're gonna go, if you believe when you pass away, you go to heaven. What is heaven? Heaven is another reality. It's another dimension, right? If you look at it logically and you try to explain it like scientifically, the only way it could ever exist would be for it to be like another dimension or another reality, right? Something we can't see that's here with us. So I started looking at the phenomenon kind of from that aspect, thinking, what if it is the reason why these religions are all like this? And then I started thinking, okay, so what if religions have to do with the phenomenon? We're getting kind of deep here. I don't want to turn anyone off. I respect everyone's religions and stuff like that. And of course, guys, I'm just sharing a thought, a theory, right?
Like I say, everyone could be wrong. We don't know who's right.
Exactly. So, that's very important to always remember. And I hope everyone knows that I may go in the wrong direction sometimes, and I've done it in the past. And you guys can always reach out to me and let me know what you think. And you might change my opinion. But I was thinking, okay, so what if you start looking at religion and these histories like that it's basically a representation of the phenomenon, right? Think about how many churches there are around the world, how many temples, how many mosques, when you walk into a mosque, you see an angel flying in the sky. You hear stories of resurrections and stars guiding people through the desert to meet the child of these gods. That right there could be the phenomenon just sitting right under our noses.
Yeah.
It could be an example of this phenomenon interacting with us since the beginning of time, somehow guiding us down this path that we've been on to who we are today, causing, beautiful things to happen and negative things to happen, but also like sitting right in front of. Every time I walk into a church now, I ruined it, because now I walk into a church and I'm like, okay, so this may be like an alien temple, and I don't think anybody's paying attention to how this looks like an alien. Like, that thing is flying right there. If I saw that come out of the sky and land in front of me, I would not think it was here to, I would be very weary if I saw a person come flying out of the sky and try to help me. I'd be like, okay, wait, you are an alien. You're not from here.
I do something similar where I walk in, and whenever I have to sing like a hymn in church, I use the excuse that the aliens wouldn't want me to be singing. So yeah, this is something that humans have definitely put in here. I don't have to sing this.
Well, I went to Catholic school too, so I read the Bible. Like I said, I respect everybody's religions, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being religious. But I think that it might be even more fascinating for you if you think that, hey, this might actually be the phenomenon presenting itself to us. And look at all these temples and mosques and rules and things that people follow and beliefs that people have.
Look at these pyramids that were built somehow, and they literally line up with the stars in a way that we would struggle to do now with modern technology.
I'm saying the truth many times is much stranger than fiction. And I think Robert Bigelow might have been, trying to say that in a way. Like, there's a lot of people just walking around not paying attention to how fascinating things are and how strange things are, really, if you think about it. It's pretty strange how our belief systems are built and all this kind of stuff. If you start breaking it down, we could talk for hours about it. But
well, listen, we could definitely do a part 2. I'm more than happy to do that. We have a lot of listener questions to get to, and they're going to touch on a few subjects that you've already sort of brought up, but this is definitely a good chance to elaborate on them as well, and some new thoughts and theories too. So I'll start off with a question from Dustin. Dustin was asking, do you think we see UFOs or UAPs over nuclear sites or nuclear vessels because they somehow use these as energy sources to power their craft? That is all for this week's show. Thank you very much for listening. Please remember to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. You can like, retweet and subscribe. That would all be very much appreciated. The shows are being uploaded onto YouTube as we speak more and more. You can sign up at patreon.com/That UFO Podcast to access the shows ad-free as well. Please get in touch on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, That UFO Podcast. Of course, on Twitter, it's at UFOUAPAM. And again, folks, as always, keep looking up. You never know what you might see.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue. I don't think he expected me to see his ass, but I'd had some champagne and smoked a little around. Meditative gamma state full on meta. You can't imagine how it could have been any better. I got to the top of the stairs and there he was. Like, you awake? I was about to abduct you, cuz. I jumped back and nearly kissed myself, and I climbed out the window after the elf, and I woke up in my bed and there was something falling on my head, and everything was weird, and everything was red. I called out to my boys. They thought this was noise. They thought it was a dream. They thought it was my toys. They thought it was my problems, and they think I should seek therapy, and I don't know what to do because it doesn't really scare me.